One of the most gratifying things I've ever done is come to one of your meetups. You know, when I came into Vegas and there for CinemaCon, that was the first time I went to one of your meetups. I couldn't believe your audience. I couldn't believe how cool everybody was. I met some dude who rode his motorcycle down from Edmonton, Canada, to come down on his motorcycle to come and see you. And you're a consummate host. And it's like going to a science fiction convention in the 80s when everybody was there because they loved genre cinema. They loved science fiction, horror, fantasy. And that's what people forget. For all the division people talk about on these platforms, we're bonded by our love of storytelling. Mm-hmm. And that's how we might be different politically, we might be different socially, whatever. But we all love this stuff. And when you all get together, that's what you feel.
And that's what it used to be a decade ago. And that's why we started the meetup. I mean, I didn't invent meetups, but I started the meetups as a thank you, right? And I wanted all my friends to be there. And it was a thank you to the audience who supports us. But when we get there, yeah, it's just a party. It's not like we're going, that damn Acolyte. No, we're like just hanging out, you know, and it's tons of fun. And it always has been. That's why I'll always do them. And the audience, this group is one of the most horribly misjudged on the internet. And every time somebody goes 100%. To a meetup and meets them, they're like, oh, wow. It's like, yeah, you know. You know, that's what I long for. I know those days are gone, but I long for the days of fandom, you know, back in 2010 when people like had a sense of humor, you know. And well, there's also better stuff out, but you know, we had a sense of humor. We could just hang out, and it was a far better time than it is now because of the corporate. I mainly blame corporatism. I completely agree with you, because nowadays, you know, it used to be the inverse of what it is now. I mean, if you think about it, and this drives me to distraction, but when George Lucas made Star Wars, it was something he wanted to do. Now Star Wars becomes a brand. You sell the brand to a corporation, and a corporation then has to be like, okay, we need to make more product. Who are we going to get to make it? And they're not going after the people that might really want to make it. They can only hire people on a spreadsheet that look good. Like, oh, okay, this person made Russian Doll, and this person did this, so let's hire them to do this show. And it's totally inverted in how it should be in terms of how you should get creative people to work on these projects. I didn't understand why Disney just didn't throw out a gauntlet and say, bring us your Star Wars. We want the most passionate filmmakers in Hollywood, people obviously with track records, of course, but to come in and pitch your idea. You know, obviously when I listened to Patty Jenkins talk about her Rogue Squadron movie, remember they did that promo with her in the airport and with the X-Wing fighter, and her father was a jet pilot. You know, he was a fighter pilot. And that's why she wanted to do it. She probably had read those Rogue Squadron books, which are pretty badass.
Yeah, Michael Stackpole. Of course, they didn't actually ask him for any input in the movie.
No, but, just like they didn't ask Timothy Zahn about Grand Admiral Thrawn either. Mm-hmm. He goes to a meeting, he gets ambushed. Can we use your character? We already used him, but can we use it?
You just brought that up, and I was kind of tracking away. The Peter Cushing news, that lawsuit that's out there from the Peter Cushing thing. The most interesting thing about that in those articles is the little blurb that says Lucasfilm didn't think they needed to get permission from anyone. So they used it, got contacted after Rogue One by Peter Cushing's estate and agent, and then paid them like $37,000 after they came to some kind of agreement. They didn't think they needed to ask for permission for anybody for that, which is wild that's just the way they operate in general. Sorry for
you know, it's a Fox. Then they went to Ian Holmes' estate, you know, to add him into Alien Romulus, and they got permission. You can't just use somebody's likeness. I mean, it's and that we're going to deal with. That's going to be a whole other issue.
Oh,
in our AI dystopian future that's coming down the road.
This is like a Disney thing, though, right? With a bunch of authors for the Star Wars expanded universe, and even for Alan Dean Foster, who did Star Wars and Alien, both bought by Disney, right? They haven't paid some of these guys royalties in a decade.
Right.
And it's a massive problem at Disney. They just don't give a fuck about that stuff.
No, and the thing is, these poor authors, they don't have enough money to hire great counsel to go after them.
No.
I mean, and I think, as Gary was talking about, the corporatization of our entertainment. I've often wondered, and obviously, if your imagination is colonized by an IP, for me, it was Star Trek at an early age. I can't get away from it. It's kind of an infection. I can never purge myself. It is a terminal disease I will take with me to my death. My love of Star Trek. Is anybody responsible for that? So if I'm somebody that has been infected by an imagination virus brought on by a love of Star Trek, and I've bought all the books and bought all the toys and been a fan since I was 5 years old, does an IP owner owe me anything for that? Because I can't shake it. And if the IP is not being run by custodians of the franchise that have my best interests as a fan at heart, are they liable? I know
they have a moral duty to provide you.
I know it's a weird thing, but eventually, if you think about it, if the corporate interests suddenly for an IP, and this is the problem, they don't realize that an IP has to be good to become an IP in the first place. They can't quantify, well, what does good mean? Do you make something good?
They can't, and it's why care has to go into these, and why it generally doesn't work when it's out of the hands of the main creator or people who actually were under that main creator and still felt passionately about Star Trek's like a lot of people, right? Star Wars is George Lucas, Lord of the Rings is Tolkien and his son carrying that, but most of the time, no, it doesn't work. Harv Bennett, famous story that you've told. Where you didn't know shit about Star Trek. And then he watched a bunch of Star Trek. That's what they need to do. Kurtzman, if he was smart, if he was taking over Star Trek, which he wasn't, he was less interested than Jar Jar Abrams was interested, but he got it. I would sit down. He could afford it. You go rent a house for 6 months, and I watch everything twice with a notebook, slowly.
And your whole staff, too.
Yeah, and your whole writing staff, and I'd hit a bunch of novels as much as I could, and I would just study. That's all I would do. And they don't take that kind of care, and you should, because you'll keep your job longer, you'll make more money.
But they won't face consequences. So they're like, why should I bother? If knowing that you put out a bad television series and like sank Rings of Power season 1, if that just got you blacklisted, they'd try a hell of a lot more to get Rings of Power season 1 to be nailed.
Dude,
and I think the most interesting part was when you said they hire by like a list, they go on a spreadsheet and hire everyone. I can't watch traditional TV anymore. Because I've watched so much YouTube, you get used to a quality level of presenting, and the people with like millions of subscribers, they essentially every single subscriber voted that I want to spend my time with this person.
Yeah.
And so the best people rise up top because everyone's all agreed this person is someone worth watching. You go back to mainstream television, it doesn't really matter why they've got chosen. Most of them don't have the talent for that, and it just makes it awful. They're like wooden. They can't present. They're like
dude. Yeah, we just saw the retirement of today. Yesterday, the final episode of the 3 greatest TV hosts you will ever see with the best chemistry you will ever fucking see. The Grand Tour. Jeremy Clarkson, James May.
Yeah. But do you know how he
Richard
hired
Hammond.
them? Hammond was just put out. They just put out a casting call.
And he was like a radio guy or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So they brought him in and then just tested it. So it was selected by that. But I think what a lot of studios do, they will select somebody to be the presenter of a major show and just be like, you will like this person now. And it's just one person's decision rather than the collective.
Instead of dealing with people that, like the BBC famously got rid of the biggest TV show in the world, broadcast in multiple versions, multiple languages, broadcast in the most countries, was Top Gear. Top Gear was it. And they blew it because they found an excuse to get rid of Jeremy Clarkson because one producer at the BBC didn't fucking like him. And then they went
and got punched in the face.
Got punched in the face. And that guy who got punched in the face ended up going and working for them again, by the way.
Yeah.
He did. The BBC looked down on it worse than he did. Okay. So, so these guys just said goodbye. And you'll never see anything like it again, but they have this great chemistry and an authenticity about them. Yes, they set up skits and all that shit, but they're real.
That's why people watch YouTube.
Yep.
It's funny when you interview celebrities, and I love celebrities, but we don't, I don't know if this is true for you, Gary, but you don't get as many views because the one thing about YouTube is people want to hang out. we might as well all be at a bar together, hanging out.
Celebrities
We'd
don't
these
have time
same
for that.
conversations. Yeah, and I think that's what YouTube really has given. And Hollywood's trying to figure it out. YouTube is the most subscribed to platform in the world.
Second largest search engine in the world, next to Google. Yeah.
Behind Rumble, of course.
Well, to tell you how good Netflix is, it's beating Netflix, but not by a lot. Which is crazy. But like, yeah, I watch it in my home theater now, Robert. I'll watch Tuesday night's main event on the big screen. I'll watch freaking Ryan on my big screen, so he looks bigger and oranger.
And some people are mixing their shows in surround too.
Yes.
And you're getting things in surround sound, which is amazing, and everybody is kicking up the production value on these shows. And
look at me. I know.
I'm gonna go off on a tangent.
But you've got great graphics.
But also the cost of entry is getting that much lower as the technology continues to advance as well, and so it's becoming much more accessible for a lot more people too.
Yeah.
Well, it's what I brought up earlier, like the cost of all this stuff. At a time when it should be getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, it just seems to be going up to 150, 250 million for 8 episodes is the most insane thing ever. You could literally... there's got to be waste. There's got to be loads of people standing around the set that don't need to be there. I think Hollywood's reached a point where they're so used to being so popular that the money was everywhere that they're not used to working under traditional business practices of cutting waste, keeping things slim, doing things efficiently.
Yeah, the producers want a big stack of cash. The actors want massive, and now they need more producers on set as well, the writers and everything. And so the amount of bloat and waste in it is insane.
Oh yeah, even though Hollywood was allowed to work through it, the government response to to COVID fucking broke so much shit. We lost 24-hour Walmarts. We lost 24-hour grocery stores, which I fucking hate. But it also, it broke Hollywood. It forced them to get into streaming probably a little sooner than they wanted to. And, now they're dealing with it. And that, as I've said, now they're competing against their own audience and against themselves. They have these back catalogs that they can't monetize for some reason that are just available now. And to the point where, yes, it's actually hurt piracy because some of this stuff is getting so cheap. Yet the streaming services are so fucking confusing. Nobody's going to get them all. It costs more than cable. So now it's just, it's basically a la carte, and people are, now the audience has learned how to, I think Hollywood relied a little bit too much on people forgetting about their subscription. And I think people are getting much better about canceling something once a show's over. And the churn that they talk about, and things have a shelf life now, and they don't know how to deal with it, and they can't. They're going to have to shrink.
They've killed off. I mean, there used to be that great business model. If something did well, which I'll never understand, something does well theatrically, and it comes to your streaming platform, it's more valuable if it did well theatrically.
Yes,
people tune in, and now they want to get rid of that theatrical window. If you do well theatrically, you've been anointed. Your film is anointed. It has a certain credibility. And when people have heard about it, even if they didn't go see it in the theater, they've heard about it. All big theatrical movies do better on streaming platforms if they had success in the theatrical marketplace. And they want to get rid of that. And then things come and go. I don't understand. And then you have all the other ancillary markets. Once it's gone theatrical, you've got video on demand, you've got physical media, which is shrinking, obviously, but all these other things haven't been shrinking. They've been getting bigger. And they want to get rid of that too.
If you look at Netflix's model, one of the reasons why I'm always subscribed to Netflix is there's always new Korean stuff just coming on, and Korean stuff is generally amazing.
Yeah.
But the way their market works is it's just loads of independent studios that make stuff and then basically sell it to Netflix. Netflix almost owns the entire country's entertainment industry at this point. And I don't know why places like they have to make all their own stuff and stuff. They could easily just get little independent studios all over the place, all making their own products and then shipping it around. It would be way more cost effective for all of them than spending $250 million on something.
When Netflix started this entire thing out, they weren't producing shit, right? They were just accumulate. They were licensing all of these things. Then they started doing some original content, some of which was really fucking good.
Yeah.
But that was a tiny, minuscule amount of the total content that was on Netflix. That's the way they've been operating their entire existence, where all these other companies, they're the ones that are producing these things. That's what they do. And so now they've got into streaming thinking that it would just be profitable right away for them to stop selling their shit to Netflix and instead put it up on their own streaming services, and they quickly realized that the math does not work.
Nope.
And they're desperate now.
And the investor money's gone.
They're desperate now to price people out with that premium option. Eventually, it's going to be like $30 to have ad-free like streaming service, because they desperately want you to have the ad tier, because they can make way more money by selling advertisers and making you an ad than they can just.
But then they're going to have to release the viewership information to get that ad revenue. And they're going to have to be honest.
That's going to be a death sentence.
And then it's going to go back to then actors are going to want more money if the show performs better, that the unions are going to get involved. And what they did was they're going to have to go back to the model that was working for decades.
Yes.
They're going to have to go back to what already worked and change things, which is kind of wacky. But, Dispara, what you brought up, seeing foreign Netflix was bringing us the world, whether it was material from Asia, France, India. I mean, that was one of the beautiful things. And the documentaries they were bringing us, there was such a diversity of stories to watch, to things to experience, world cinema, getting shows like Squid Game, when I don't think 10 years ago we would have ever seen something like that.
Money Heist? I never would have watched Money Heist.
No.
Money Heist was dope.
Doctor Who's resurgence in America is directly linked to Netflix. It was right before the 50th anniversary. Netflix had all the modern Doctor Who that a lot of people just couldn't see in order normally. And it led to probably its peak in this country right around the 50th anniversary. And that was because of Netflix, because we had access to it. We could see it. But yeah, ultimately, either Hollywood has to go back to what worked before, or they're going to get passed up. I don't know which happens. Some form of Hollywood will always be around, but I think it really does fracture, and you're going to see just more stuff being made around the world and around this country. You'll start seeing different hubs of entertainment. They're starting to happen. There's Atlanta, right? Atlanta's a hub. Here
Louisiana.
Louisiana here in Texas is kind of a podcast hub. There's a lot of podcasters here. So you're seeing that fracture, and I think that's all of it's good, because it'll give more people more opportunities.
And then you've got companies like Neon. They had Long Legs was their biggest theatrical release, and they're making movies. The idea, the real problem with studios, what really happened that people I don't think understand enough, is that it used to be a studio would make a movie for the domestic market. That's why we would get adult dramas, we'd get thrillers, we'd get comedies, we'd get horror movies, because movies would cost not a whole lot. Hunt for Red October was a movie that cost $30 million. Now it costs $200 million, and it would be a 10-episode show. But now the studios are only making movies for the international market, so they have to spend $150 million or $200 million in hopes that they'll make $1 billion. But on the flip side of that, you got people like A24 and Neon, and people have become A24 fans. They'll make horror films, or even Paramount will make a movie like Smile for less than $20 million. It makes $200 million. Well, that's a good business.
That's a good business.
But and if you did 10 of those a year, that's healthy. But the studios are always shooting for the fences. Why not get a base hit every time?
Right.
And the real question is, when we watch a movie, and I'm obsessed by this too, 90 minutes or 2 hours. That's all you get, okay? Yep. Would you rather watch a YouTube show like FNT? Would you want to go see maybe a mediocre movie at the theater that you pay $100 to take your family to see? It's the same amount of time. And YouTube, for no money, for free, can be as entertaining for an audience as going to the biggest blockbuster. In fact, even more so, because people are hanging out with their friends. And
you don't have to put pants on.
You don't have to put pants on.
You don't have to put pants on.
But I mean, that's what they don't understand, is it's not about the entertainment. You don't have to spend $200 million to entertain people for 90 minutes or 2 hours. And that's something Hollywood used to be able. They were the only game in town for that kind of entertainment. And if it ain't great, if your TV show isn't great, it's not going to succeed, because we don't have to spend any money to put this show on.
No.
Nerdrotic.com. Please subscribe.